Hi there, my name is Betty Skinner and welcome to my kitchen for coffee time. This message is brought to you by the Prime Minister's Path Collective Reflections Future Directions project that's ongoing here in the Township of Wilmot. For more information on myself or on the project, head to the description below and click on the link to the project page. So last week we talked about kind of the beginnings of Canada, and where that starts is the relationship between Indigenous people and Western European settlers who migrated to Turtle Island. And this week, something that I wanted to really talk about was incongruencies between Indigenous understandings of land occupation and Western European understandings of land occupation. An agreement that I want to introduce today as part of our knowledge sharing piece is information about the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. The Dish with One Spoon was an agreement that was ratified between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee here in the Great Lakes area. This wampum belt has a white belt with a little purple circle right in the middle of that belt. And what that circle is meant to symbolize is a dish or a bowl with one singular spoon. The belief amongst these Indigenous nations was that it was barbaric to bar other human beings, even groups that you were at war with, from life-giving resources such as food, water, the means to shelter. The agreement was that you would take the spoon, take what you need from the dish before replacing the spoon and allowing others to also access what they need to live a good and fulsome life. It was a sentiment that existed as the law of the land. And so the reason why I wanted to bring this teaching to the table that I've been gifted is that it is reflective for me of a very Indigenous way of understanding the land and our relationship to Mother Earth herself. This is something that is so deeply intertwined with Indigenous ways of knowing, because part of indigeneity is being connected to the land that you have lived on since time immemorial, right? And so Indigenous people, especially my knowledge is more so based on Turtle Island, but I know that there are congruencies from my Indigenous community back in Philippines, where my mom is from. Land is not for ownership. And this is something that is really interesting and is very antithetical to how we have structured our living environment, right? Obviously, here in the colonial nation state of Canada, it is possible to quote unquote own land via a legal system that we have created. However, in Indigenous ways of understanding land is not something that we can own. Land is something that we benefit from, that we live interconnectedly with, and that we are responsible for stewarding. And this is because the interactions between human and land, or the relationship, is understood as reciprocal rather than hierarchical. So in Western Europe, during the Enlightenment, human nature dualism was a really, really big mode of thought, and it was a big shift into the idea that the earth was made for us. However, in Indigenous ways of thinking, this is not the case, but rather we are part of the land and the land is part of us. The land gives to us everything that we need to survive, and so we need to reciprocate that giving, right? It's not just our responsibility to receive, but it's also our responsibility to give and to steward the land. And so you'll hear that a lot, this idea of stewardship. It's fundamentally premised on care. So I think it's really interesting to kind of lay that out. You know, you have the piece of history with the Dish with One Spoon, but then you can also take that history and you can understand it on a deeper level and really take a look into incongruencies between Western European thought and Indigenous thought. And so when we look at the way these schools of thought are reflected in our institutions, so the government, in our political environment, in our educational institutions, in our municipal bylaws, we can see that all of these institutions and these structures are built on a Western European way of thinking about the land. I think that this is a really important consideration for all of us to be aware of, right? If we can understand each other's frame of thought better, we can start to understand the emotions behind certain reactions or behaviors of our community members that we all have to live in harmony with. Lalin, thank you so much. Nawa, miigwech, and I hope you have a really, really lovely rest of your week.